Okay, so I was in bed all day and I didn't have any classes, but I decided to do my English homework early. And we had to read the story, The Lottery, which still we have to write an essay on, so I thought I'd further analyze it before we have to do that. So pretty much, there's this town with like 300 people, really tiny town. I assumed that it was like early mid-1900s. The author, named Shirley Jackson, was born in 1919, although I heard that's wrong. She was actually born in 1916. Doesn't matter. I'm assuming she wrote it based off of her lifetime. So anyways, here's the plot. Tiny town, gathering together, getting ready to participate in an event known as the lottery. It's the title. They're like pointing out specific people, talking about the date is June 27th, the time's 10 a.m., they're waiting for Mr. Summers to come out with his black box. There's an old man, Warner, who's been around, forever and knows all about the tradition. And, you don't know the tradition, but you know that the lottery happens every single year. There's a comment that, like, wow, it's already here again. Seems like just yesterday we had it. There's children playing. There's an air of happiness with a slight feeling of anticipation, but not good anticipation, like bad anticipation. Because everybody's really quiet and kind of solemn, especially when it comes time for Mr. Summers to call out names, and as soon as people grab their little slips of paper, which it's only the head of households grabbing the slips of paper. She's the only woman who takes the lottery slip for her husband because he has a broken leg and her sons are not old enough. I don't know why the author made it so that only the head of households can draw for the lottery. It might have to go into the fact that they're trying to ground tradition into this. Before this even starts, this woman, Mrs. Hutchinson, comes super duper late. As far as people gathering, as if she forgot that it's a really important day. She runs out, joins her husband, kind of jokes around with people, talks to people. They generally seem to like her. Her name's Tessie. She urges her husband to go get his note when his name's called. And of course, when everybody pulls out their slips to look at whatever's on there, it said that Bill Hutchinson's got it. So we're okay, what does he want? And the woman who didn't have her husband with her was like, yo, son, go get your father. She tells him to go run. Mrs. Dunbar. Which we're okay, why is she doing that? Bill Hutchinson was standing quiet, staring down at the paper in his hand. Suddenly, Tessie Hutchinson shouted to Mr. Summers, "You didn't give him enough time to take any papers he wanted. I saw you. It wasn't fair." Okay. So, something's not fair. Suddenly, there's this negativeness. You're oh shoot, what is this lottery? What has their household won? Because he drew for their household, not for themselves. Tessie tries to get Mr. Summers to get her daughters or her husband's daughters, it's not really said whether or not he had a second wife, to draw for the next round, which would add a greater chance of Tessie's family not getting it and those daughters and their husbands and their children getting it. Okay, so something's up. And then eventually they do a second drawing with the family, which they only include the 3 children and Mr. and Mrs. Hutchinson. And, of course, Tessie draws a piece of paper that has a circle on it. Everybody else has a blank piece of paper. So, what they do is they stone her to death. At least it's assumed that it's to death. They never actually say if it's to death. The last line is, "It isn't fair, it isn't right," Mrs. Hutchinson screamed, and then they were upon her. All the people she was talking with, very lackadaisy in the beginning of the story, are picking up rocks. Children were picking up stones in the beginning of the story. They were putting them in piles. They were like running around. They were really giddy about it. But like when you read it, you don't really think like, oh, what are the stones for? You're just like, oh, they're just being kids. And the girls weren't really participating in the stone, like grabbing the stones, the young girls, which I think kind of goes along with the like women didn't draw for their houses, because like it was like, Mrs. Dunbar, do you not have a son? And she's all like, I do, but he's not even freaking 16 yet. Paraphrasing, of course. I don't know if it's just the timing, because like this is still the time when like the women's movement was, I'm assuming that since the author was born in like 1919, which is when women were able to vote. I'm assuming that it was still like shaky and rocky. Some things to notice in the story that I thought were kind of weird is that like every household had their man, except for one didn't, that they like specifically point out, which is the Watsons, which a boy draws for his mother. So should we assume that his dad was a victim of the lottery? Are children and women more likely to be picked for the lottery? I mean, if you have like 5 kids and you draw for your family, there's more of a chance that one of your children will be picked. What is the point of the lottery? Man Warner points out that it is tradition, and you know, people used to say that it helps the crops grow, which we can assume it's like a sacrifice. It's like an animal sacrifice, virgin sacrifice that happened way back when. That's what it is. But it's in more of a modern setting, which makes you question, like, why are people still doing this? And what I interpret the story as is kind of when tradition doesn't matter anymore, to the extreme. Why, like, they even point out in the story that, like, they don't even know what the reason for it is still, or they don't remember a lot of the rituals, they don't remember a lot of the tradition, but they do remember to use stones. So that's good. Another thing they don't use for the tradition anymore is wood chips instead of paper, but now they have too many people, so they have to use paper. So obviously a lot of time has passed since they started this. They point out that other towns are no longer doing it, and the old man's like, wow, they're fools. But, I mean, reading this, like, once you get to the end, you're like, why is this town still doing this? They're being ridiculous. So that's what I got out of it. Break tradition. This story is like chock full of suspense, because the entire time you don't know what the lottery is, and like they don't really emphasize any character enough for you to know who's gonna win. Even though Tessie comes a little bit late, they still like have her talking about as much as other characters. It's written in third person, but you can't hear any of the thoughts of the people, except for people that are speaking out, which would be Tessie, because she's like, this isn't fair, this is not cool, we should start over. Another thing I got out of that was like, did she do that at other lottery drawings? Did she do that every year where she's just like, this isn't fair? Or is it just because her family got picked? I think that goes along with like, when something happens to you, it's like crazy, but when it's happening to other people, you're just kind of like, whatever. So at every lottery drawing, she could have just watched and, you know, participated. But when it comes to being her, it's not fair anymore. Which, can we assume that, like, that happens for every single person that ends up doing the lottery? Like, once they get picked, they're like, whoa, why are we doing this anymore, guys? Let's stop. But no. I thought the story was interesting because it doesn't really have a change in it. Like, some stories, like, when you read them, the whole point of the conflict is to, like, break tradition. And I like that this one, it was still kind of going on. The series I was going to compare it to was The Hunger Games, of course, which I've read the whole trilogy, and in the first Hunger Games book, there's like this like emphasis on like things are going to change. Like Katniss, you just changed everything. But this, it's like that didn't happen. Tessie's words did not change anyone. They didn't bring anyone to be like, let's start something new, do a rebellion, join those towns that are changing. No. It was just like, this is how our town is. This is one instance of this happening, and now you know. So it was kind of different than what I'm used to reading. Although the villagers had forgotten the ritual and lost the original black box, they still remembered to use stones.